Hello, friends. Lee C. Camp here. You're listening to No Small Endeavor. This is our unabridged interview with Baratunde Thurston. Baratunde is a social commentator, a satirist, a comedian, doing remarkable work in lots of different areas. He's, as you'll hear him say in this particular interview, he sees himself as a storyteller, and one especially who is elucidating, telling tales about our interdependence. Here of late, he's been working on a new project called Life with Machines, a YouTube-based podcast exploring our interdependence with technology and machines, a fascinating sort of premise for a show, which makes for a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation with Baratunde. I learned a lot and want to keep digging into a lot of the things that I learned from Baratunde. As you may or may not know, I was an undergrad computer science major before I got into theology stuff. And so, this was this was way back in the days. It was post the punch card days, for those of you who know what those are. It was after the punch card days, but it was prior to the rapid rise of the PC. PCs kind of began about the time I was concluding my degree in computer science. But I just couldn't have imagined, back then, none of us, I think, could have imagined back then where we were headed and the sorts of power at hand with things like AI. And so this necessarily raises for us all sorts of pressing ethical, philosophical questions about what does it mean to be human. That's the kind of question I keep kind of asking myself, is what does it mean to be human in this sort of age? What kind of communities do we want to have? What's it mean to love? What's it mean to make some sort of meaningful contribution to the world in the age of AI? And I love some of the ways that we get at some of the possibilities of exploring those kinds of questions in this conversation with Baratunde. Enjoy. As I said, I think this is a great conversation. Baratunde Thurston tells stories of interdependence through our relationship with nature, each other, and technology. He is an Emmy-nominated host, a writer, and public speaker. His newest project is Life with Machines, a YouTube podcast exploring the human side of the AI revolution, which we'll be discussing today. Baratunde is also a host and executive producer of the PBS series America Outdoors, creator and host of the How to Citizen podcast, and a founding partner and writer at Puck. His comedic memoir, How to Be Black, is a New York Times bestseller. Welcome, Baratunde.
Lee Camp, it is good to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Very pleased to have you with us. Been looking forward to the conversation and grateful that you've decided to join us for this adventure today. So, you've worn a lot of hats, a lot of fascinating hats. Comedian, technologist, civic organizer, outdoor enthusiast. So I'm wondering about a through line through all of those sorts of roles and endeavors. One that I would speculate is that it's a sort of through line of asking a question about what does it mean to live well together with others. But how would you describe the through line?
That's really good. That's really good. I might need to update my official bio. It's language I've played with, but that was a clean version, and I think the width has been expanding in terms of who I am most curious about us being able to live with. I've described it as interdependence as the core theme, and how do we live in right relationship with our planet, with each other, and with these rising machines. I think that there's an additional through line of the role that I see that I play in this, which is that of telling stories. I don't really build movements. I don't lead tens of thousands of people to the gates myself. I definitely amplify that work. But the narrative sphere is my primary realm. And the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, I think, shapes a lot of who and how we are. So I'm really invested in story.
We're gonna have a good conversation then. Yeah. So let me ask you. You did your undergrad in philosophy at Harvard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So why would you say that work has informed your work and what you care about?
That program allowed, encouraged, and I would say even forced me to ask the next question. It's like you're given permission of a 2-year-old as a 20-year-old, but why? But why? But why? But why? And you start to recognize the level of assumptions that are in the model that we live in of economics, of political rules, of culture. And it's pretty invented stuff. Who, why, what are we getting out of it? What are we not? So I got from philosophy permission and incentive to question more deeply. The other thing I think I got from it was a lot of close reading and reliance on other people to do that. My most joyful experience really was my intro to philosophy class with Anthony Appia. And I was in a study group with a Mexican-American from Texas, a Mexican-American from South LA, like gangland experiences, a Saudi woman, and a German woman, both born and raised in those countries, and me, black man from DC. And we were diving into Descartes and looking at Kant's critique of pure reason and trying to find our own critique and merely trying to understand.
Yeah.
And all these different cultural backgrounds coming to bear on what look like the same words, but they have really, really different meanings. And it was fun. It was hard. We were up late. It was that classic college mode that a parent wants. Like, oh, you're not up late drinking. You're up late thinking. And that will remain the official story of my college experience.
So what about satire? I mean, that's been a huge piece of your life as well, writing for The Onion for a while, and then your How to Be Black and the various work you've done in that regard. So where did satire come from for you as a fundamental genre or lens to look at the world?
Yeah, thanks for that. The Daily Show was also a part of that professional experience. So one, I want to give myself kudos and a pat on the back that I was successfully able to earn salary, healthcare, dental coverage through comedy. And just in the great span of the billions that have lived on this earth, it's a very rare kind of 1% universe to live in, maybe 0.1%. So I count myself lucky and occasionally talented. I fell into comedy. My first bout with it was as not creating it. I was a serious kid, Lee. I was interested in all these big questions. My mom was a very political and spiritual person, and I carried myself a little more comfortably with adults than my youthful peers. And comedy allowed me to express and safely feel frustration at injustice. And I could make jokes about it. I could find jokes about it first, then start to be able to make bad jokes about it, then get better at making good jokes about it as a way of explaining the world. So I stumbled into it initially through black comedians that my mom was watching, Richard Pryor, Whoopi Goldberg were a lot of the early influences, but also Garrison Keillor and his whole like Wobegon thing. Car trips to national parks and campgrounds with mom usually had some kind of comedic soundtrack and story in the background. Then the internet gave me more latitude to start exploring my own tastes. I started curating lists of comedy and jokes that I found online and sharing it with friends in high school. This is the early 1990s. Then in college, I found my own voice through a satirical email newsletter. This is 1996 to 1999. And by the time I graduated college in 1999, I got most serious in 2001, a few years later, and I took a class at the Boston Center for Adult Education, just like a continuing education class taught by a local comedian named Steve Kalishman. Long may we remember his name. He really helped open a door, and that brought me into the world of stand-up. And I had been comfortable on stage, but that was a different universe. And I just entered this pocket of exploration where I was doing the stand-up classes I was also traveling to New York City every week from Boston to do a satirical comedy writing class with educators from The Onion and The Daily Show and Saturday Night Live. Like they would grade our work and tell us about their career paths. I moved to Chicago for a summer to do improv. So I was just in it. And I restarted my newsletter to talk about Bush 1 and what was happening with civil rights or not, and to level truths without facts. That is in part the role of satire. Communicate something that's true that maybe not is factual. And then I found an opportunity because friends knew what I was looking for, because I was attuned enough and lucky to work for The Onion. And that was like going to advanced study. That was my own center for advanced study for the comedic arts. It was my post-undergrad life, 5 years, every day, in the trenches with some of the most talented, focused, clear thinking, clear communicating satirists, in the spirit of Shakespeare, but also in the spirit of great American satirists, of Bill Hicks, oh my goodness, what's this guy's name? Who's the greatest American satirist of all time, Lee?
Well,
Huck Finn, come on.
Mark Twain. I thought you were going to point to Mark Twain, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to presume who you were going to say.
You are free to presume. So anyway, I got to be daily in that universe, and I learned a lot, and I kind of learned by osmosis. So I shot out of The Onion, and I was never the same. I always had more play, more savageness, I would say, to my tone of voice. And the thing, I could talk too long about this, the ability to mimic form in order to challenge substance within that form. That was a real education. To
mimic form while challenging the content within the form.
So The Onion mimics the form of news media.
Yeah.
Mimics the form of a radio broadcast, of a television broadcast, of a print news operation with a website. And my job was to bring it into a more technological reality, present/future. Putting The Onion on social media, getting the publishing schedule to be more real time, launching the first apps for the iPad and the iPhone and Android, engaging real time with community. These are things legitimate news operations are trying to figure out. And our legitimately fake news operation was also trying to figure out. But it meant in order to satirize news, you have to understand it. You have to be super familiar with the form. My older sister was a journalist. She gave me an AP style book when I was in high school. I did my college newspaper when I was at Harvard. So I knew I had the trappings of it. But actually satirizing the thing made me understand it even more.
Yeah.
And so I would leave The Onion and start a technology company premised on tech satire. And what we're doing now with Life with Machines, there's more coming in terms of how do we build, not just tell a story that people passively experience, but create a world that they can inhabit and interact with, create immersive experiences. Tech allows you to do that. XR, AR, VR, AI. It's all getting much more high touch.
Right.
And satire it's also just one of the only ways through the absurdity of our reality now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit more then about what drove you in the midst of all that to start this new podcast, Life with Machines, and what you see as your driving agenda there.
Yeah. To answer that, I don't want to give you a 10-minute answer, so I'll try to edit quickly. But what drove me to make Life with Machines, I think there's probably 3 parts to that. There's my origin with my mom, who was a coder and a technologist, and so much tech infusion into my upbringing through Harvard through jobs at The Onion, Daily Show, et cetera. It was all tech-related digital jobs. But along the way, I have had a deep commitment to how we self-govern and relate to each other through this thing called democracy, which I deeply believe is something we do, not something we have. It's one of my associates in this work, John Alexander, puts it so succinctly that way, as me and my wife Elizabeth have put it, citizen as a verb, how to citizen. And years of storytelling and experience and advocacy there gave me a faith in people and a faith in us that our political system is totally unworthy of, but the people always are. So that was helpful. That was a 2020 formal initiation of that and still in it. And then the third element is my foray into the natural world and reconnecting and regrounding with Earth. And I got to do 2 seasons of this beautiful experiential show for PBS called America Outdoors, where I'm literally touching grass. I'm on rivers and mountaintops with laborers and extreme athletes and indigenous people and so many different folks who feel at home with that connection to nature. So in the midst of that journey, as I'm like deepening my own practice of democracy with humans and with planet, ChatGPT drops. And it's exciting, it's overwhelming, it's confusing. It's reminiscent of the mobile moment and the social media moment and the cloud moment times each other. And it is threatening or bolstering my own theory of everything in terms of how we co-create our reality and our future. Will AI help us in our connection to Earth, or will it further sever us from this planet? Will it create collective agency and not just individual agency? Making little armies of one and societies of one, which I think our whole political economic system has really driven toward. The community pools, not everybody's got a private pool. The public theater is now a private home theater, and public school is private health, private school and private tutoring. And AI is like, oh, everyone has their own tutor. So that's empowering. It's also fragmenting and isolating. So how do we look at this moment, which I think will persist? This is not the flash of crypto that seemed to be. I think this is much more sustained. And what is it going to mean for our human experience and how we connect to life writ large, life that came before, life that will come after, and life that's beyond human. So that's, Sam Altman forced me into this position. I tried to get out, Lee, and they dragged me back in. And, I worked tech support in college, and people still ask me for help. I'm setting up the whole networking for me and a lot of my friends. So I had to dive in and making a show. That's the inquiry now. It was group philosophy study when I had a professor and a formal structure. Now we get a team together. We have researcher, writer, producer, showrunner, and some AI to help us in this collective inquiry and experimentation. That's what drove me.
So, in I think it's your show trailer, you asked the question, will we be AI's parents or its pets? But if we turn that around and ask, what do you think AI teaches us about ourselves? What are you seeing or speculating that AI teaches us about what it means to be human?
We are less and more than we think. We are less special than we think, in that AI is able to produce things. People using AI are able to produce things that previously only people in collaboration actively with other people consciously could produce. Works of art, works of bad art, works of business strategy or seeming business strategy. It's, the irony that the job displacement that machines were supposed to wreak on society is being visited upon the knowledge worker, the white collar worker, the upper middle class manager, much more than the physical laborer at this moment. Really both, but there's, and the coder in particular, right? Microsoft has got multiple waves of laying off people, making more money than ever, defined by technology and software engineering, because these machines can pull that off. So that makes us less special. And I think AI reveals that we're more special. There are our embodied existence for now is still unique. Our collective sensing and knowing that, this indiscernible nature of who we are, that je ne sais quoi, that as the French might put it, there is something human, something about being of our type of life. And there's a whole debate, discussion, scientific and otherwise, about when AI might be considered living. If we've already crossed that, I don't think so. Will we? Most probably. But that the nature of us as living organic beings is special. And we will most likely value that uniquely in a future where our outputs and our economic productivity is not the special thing at all.
Yeah, fascinating. One of the things that you're pointing to that I myself very much appreciate is that you're kind of refusing to give us any sort of reductionistic account of what it means to be human, right? It's that there's no simple phrase that sums up what's special about being human. Because, for a long time, there'd be many that would have said, well, can the machine reason and talk in such a way so that behind a closed screen, we would think that's what a human would do? And
like a Turing test.
A Turing test, exactly. Yeah. And we know, and now we know. Well, of course, AI can do this, right? We thought that I don't know. We seem that we've kept looking for some sort of way to say, well, this is what is the essence of being human, and yet it seems to me that I don't know. I guess I keep wanting to say there is no essence of being human, in the sense that it's a very complex reality of what it means to be a human, right? It's that we're embodied, like you say, and I'm not so sure. It seems to me that we learn a lot of things by being embodied that an AI can't learn yet, right? Because I think we learn a great deal through pain, and we learn a great deal through pleasure, and various sensate experiences teach us a great deal that I don't know yet. Maybe someday, I don't know, but at the moment at least, that's something very moving about what it means to be human. Another thing that you pointed to is that we tell stories to one another. And that there's something about telling of stories that also makes us human. And it's a primary way in which we're formed. Our character is formed, our sense of what we value is formed, sense of community is formed, and so forth and so on. So I don't know. What are you seeing in terms of reductionistic ways of thinking about what it means to be human?
Not a fan. I guess I'm an expansionist in contradiction to being a reductionist. There's, the human as performer of deeds that can be performed by others means that we cannot rely on that as a distinguishing trait or a distinguishing and defining characteristic of what it means to be human. I do think embodiment is a big part of it. My wife Elizabeth says, we're entering an age of embodiment, and I think that's really an interesting parallel to the age of AI and synthetic and generated and cloud-based. Right, there's a lot of intelligence potentially in that, but it's very distinct if it's not in a body of our kind. They'll have bodies too. I don't think the lack of a body is not going to like protect us. They will have bodies. They already do. Some of them look like cars. Some of them look like vacuums. And they will have humanoid versions, and they'll sense infrared light, and they'll have seismics, and they'll sense things we can't as well. And we will sense things that they can't. But I don't think that's going to be enough to say like, oh, this is what it means to be human. I think what it means to be human is always shifting. And, is it to be a child of God? Is it to be a member of a lineage? Is it to be molded in clay, in the image of a higher being? Is it to be in community of others? Is it to speak this particular language in this way? Is it to know these songs and these rituals and these traditions? Is it to live and then to die? Right? Humans are a story. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Does a large language model have that kind of story? Is our finiteness and our imperfection a part of what we embrace? I was recently a part of an event with the youth poet laureate who closed it all out, Salome A. Her last name begins with the letter A, but it looks like Salome, but it's pronounced Salome. And she wrote a whole poem for this event about how it's the blemishes and the self-doubt and the low self-esteem and the imperfection that we're going to really lean into and claim. And all these things we've been trying to fix about ourselves and eradicate, we're going to race toward them as proof of humanity, which will have some kind of value in the future. There's, this parents, pets thing that I threw in that trailer. There's a missing P, which is partner. And I wrestled with the trailer, like rule of threes. And the person I was working with, like, just keep it simple. Parents or pets, it punches harder. But I was like, oh, but it's less complete. And I want partner in there too. And I think we're going to have all three. I think we're not building tools. We're creating a new population that we will live with, we will work with, we will play with. They'll be in our org charts. They'll be in our friend networks. They'll be in our family trees. Children will grow up and date them. And we'll have changed laws, as we've done before, to allow for deep partnership, what we call marriage today, or adoption, of some kind. And all of that is going to create, for lack of a better word, a real funky future. And it's going to, and it's going to press on us about what do we value, about what do we want to preserve, about what we want to claim as our human role. And in the greater context, Lee, I'm also like, I'm in an expansive quest, as in a subset of questions about our relations. And as much as I stretch into this machine and AI conversation, I'm also like humbly stretching into this more than human life, this rights of nature, this indigenous worldview conversation, this what is the intelligence of nature and the network of trees and mycorrhizal fungi and the animal kinship that many people across time have experienced before we were severed from earth and land. And there's something really convergent about this moment where our climate crisis amongst the many is requiring of some traditional indigenous ecological knowledge and wisdom, and some insights and pattern matching and recognition of the highest levels of machine learning. And I think our human future will likely lay in a recognition, a humble recognition of our position on a spectrum of broadly defined life. And even if life is ambiguous or uncertain, a spectrum of literal light. That at the very end of the longest day, we're just light. We are vibrating at a frequency. We are explosion, Big Bang energy, And whether it is this remote control that I hold up in my hand right now, or the plants I see out my window, or the audio transcription service that you're likely going to use to help create the transcript of this based on AI, they're all energy, and we are definitely that. And we have temporary form and awareness of that form in these bodies, and we create the meaning of that for ourselves. So what meaning do we want to create? What's going to make it worthwhile? And not a nihilistic, meaningless, everything is everything and nothing is nothing, land of blah. I don't want that. I want meaning.
What do you, how do you think about meaning? What does it mean to say you want meaning?
I think for me, it means that no pun intended, wanting meaning means that I want to feel that effort expended is worth something more than explicit financial reward. That's just not enough. Or recognition and public accolade and ego stroking, which as a public speaker, performer, thinker, yeah, definitely want those things. But there's a belonging to community. There's the desire for meaning leads there or derives from there, or maybe it's both, maybe it's a circle, and a belonging to a sense of purpose. And the story, I think the magical thing is meaning is constantly changing. Does this political moment that we're in the United States story, what does it mean? Is it just events happening? Is it just sequences of actions and consequences? Or does it mean something? Does it mean something to those who came before? Does it mean something to those who will come later? That's an interpretation game. That's a story game. The people who founded this place, the official ones, the ones we recognize, ascribed meaning to symbols. To religious leaders ascribe meaning to behaviors and actions otherwise unexplained or perfectly explained, depending on the meaning you ascribe to the interpretation that they offer. And I think meaning is what provides a sense, certainly for me, it makes nonsense into sense. And I think we require that. I don't think we're wired to just anarchy, chaos, and total ambivalence. I think we need some orienting. We need a compass. And that sometimes it's the market, okay? Sometimes it's survival and protection of a child or a loved one. Sometimes it's a higher power or a set of rules. Sometimes it's just winning and sports kind of meta. But we're constantly creating these stories. And I think it's because we need to make meaning because it's not just logic functions. And if A, then B, consequences of actions, there's meaning we must ascribe.
Yeah.
But that's so available. It's so open. So it's like, all right, it kind of gives us more power then to decide, all right, what does this tragedy mean? Does it mean I'm a failure? Does it mean I'm getting what I deserve? Or does it mean I'm being granted a painful opportunity to learn something so that I move differently in the future?
Yeah. If we were sitting over a beer, I have a whole lot of follow-up questions about all you just said the last 5 minutes. But unfortunately, we don't have either the beer or the time. But so much to helpful and provocative and worth continuing to ruminate on. But let me go to the question about power just a second. In your How to Citizen, your homepage there, you kind of have 4 big points. To citizen is to show up and participate, to invest in relationships with others, to understand power, to be fluent in power and understand how to use it for our collective benefit, and is to value the collective, to work towards outcomes that benefit the many. So let's talk about that notion of power just a second. You're encouraging us to understand power, to be fluent in power, and understand how to use it. So first, let me ask sort of a diagnostic / social critique kind of question. When, given that you care about power and you're trying to help people understand the machinations and or the productive use of power, what do you see as the way power is at work in the rapid revolutionary development of AI in ways that might be very destructive?
I'm a big fan of South Park as an agent of satire in our cultural universe, and the teacher, I think is Mr. Mackey. He would say to this question, "Okay, it's pretty bad. I would say it's pretty bad. Okay, power's definitely getting concentrated more rapidly than ever. To be honest, despite the promises made of distribution and decentralization, what we're seeing is a re-oligarchization of what's supposed to be a people power system." Okay, so it's not good. It's bad. I would say it's bad. Yeah, it's we always have choice, and each of us individually does not have the same opportunity to create influence as others of us individually at any given moment. And so right now, because of consolidation of power in the executive branch away from legislative and judicial, in the case of the national legislative, they volunteered that. They have, for a long time, ceded power to the executive. We haven't declared war in a very long time. We've definitely been engaged in wars, but even more aggressively in the era of Trump too. And I think you see the courts being ignored and challenged. And with what army would they enforce, right? There has to be an agreement by these other branches to obey and to adhere, to conform. And if not, then we have a test. And so into that environment, you also unleash most likely the most culturally, economically, technologically disruptive force maybe ever. Printing press did a big one, took a long time. Certainly Industrial Revolution, huge moment, took decades and decades and decades to really turn to maximum impact. Monotheism, huge revolution, took hundreds of years to really, really propagate that and created empires and colonization and all these things. So we're in a civilization defining moment of disruption at a pace that's unprecedented, at a scale that's probably unprecedented. It's certainly matched with pace. And the resources defining it are highly concentrated. This technology is not driven by a government by, of, and for the people, as was the internet when it was housed in a defense department run by a pretty representative and constitutional democracy. AI is not run by that democracy. It is run by a literal handful of companies who have marching orders of a primary, mandate is to return value to shareholders. And that's newish. That's newish. I think, the Dutch East India Company had a similar motivation. There's a lot of corporations that were involved in setting up the U.S. Even that structure was novel and unleashed so much momentum. So we're in that, but it's like times everything else. So yeah, my analysis is that the tendency toward concentration of power and thus abuse is extremely high because AI is maybe not coincidentally being born at a time of concentration of political and economic power already. The requirement for vast resources of compute, of financial resources, of data, this all gives huge advantages to huge firms, to monopolistic behavior, anti-competitive behavior, and now a government that really wants to look the other way with the excuse of we got to defeat China. So yeah, that's not great. that's I would say that is suboptimal, to use some tech language. Doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion, but we have our work cut out for us. Those who think that power should be within the hands of the people, that it is best wielded when shared, and that we should be suspicious of heavy concentrations of power
Yeah.
in any partisan sense whatsoever. You can have left dictators and right dictators. Like authoritarianism is available to all ideologies. So yeah, AI could really, really accelerate bad things for those of us who love people power.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tristan Harris, formerly at Google, leaves and starts the Center for Humane Technology, and his things. We need a narrow path. The narrow path between, on the one hand, kind of the techno oligarchy of nation states and corporations, which can kind of lead us to this dystopic kind of overbearing use of technology, and then on the other hand, we need to avoid the utter democratization that could lead to chaos. One leads to dystopia, one leads to chaos, and that we need to have some sort of path down the middle, but it's going to require a new imagination for framing. Instead of thinking, okay, all this is inevitable, so we just got to rush out there in our capitalist pursuits and get stuff out as quickly as possible. He's encouraging us to say, no, it's not inevitable. We can step back and we can make some choices about serving some sort of common good, some sort of way of serving humanity. How do you react to what he's saying, or who are people that are raising similar sorts of questions that you're finding compelling and worth paying attention to?
I am broadly aligned with Tristan. I've known him for when he was still at Google as a philosopher. And we had a really beautiful conversation at a coffee shop in the East Village. We were both in New York about what was happening with social media and these algorithmic incentives. And he went on to create apps and nonprofits and films and advocate for something that's human and humane. I support that. And we had his co-founder, Asa Raskin, on Life with Machines to talk about the Earth Species Project and the ability to use these tools to connect with the animal world and understand them in a really literal sense. Some people really do understand animals, some veterinarians, some indigenous folks, some very spiritually aligned people, horse whisperers, etc. But for most of us, we don't know what's going on. So that's a long-winded respect to Tristan. What I see in opposition to my concern about dystopia, deep concentration of power, some basically massive techno-fascist authoritarian state where we hail Lord Zuckerberg and Lord Bezos and Lord Musk. It's very possible, not really what I'm for. So I do see signs of an alternative that could happen. I would quickly ping and highlight Audrey Tang and collective intelligence. I would highlight the bioregional movement, which is looking at organizing people not around literally man-made fake political lines drawn in sand, but around nature's boundaries. I would point very historically to confederacies of self-government, like the Haudenosaunee, who predate democracy on this here Turtle Island, North America land by many hundreds, if not thousands of years, of how do you make peace happen amongst distinct nations, but form something whole out of that? I would point to All Tech is Human as a community of people who are championing responsible tech. I would point to the Data and Society Research Institute, where I've been an advisor for some time, who are illuminating and highlighting a lot of what we need to be concerned about, but also how do we shape the discourse and the debate. I would highlight France and their approach, the EU more broadly, France in particular, because they do not want to be linguistically colonized with language models that are predicated on English or economically colonized by companies that are only anchored in the US or North America. And I would point to Claudia Falitz at an organization called DemNext, John Alexander, who I've already cited, people who are innovating in democracy and the technological practice of that social tool. People who are innovating and applying the technology in a good way, in a responsible way, and people who are binding to the earth and planet differently. I see some convergence of all that, which looks really different than we all become citizens of Amazon or Meta. And what I see in the combination of all these things is, all right, you take the idea of representative and electoral democracy, which is really stale in the US now. It's a lot of money, a lot of extremism, a lot of influencer culture infecting state and national legislatures all over the country. And you acknowledge, this is broken. It was Democrats, or it's just the form is broken. It's whatever. But there's this other form, this thing called a citizens' assembly. The Greeks trusted it more than elections, it turns out. And people are conscripted into service. It's truly random and thus truly representative. It's expertly facilitated. So you're not just dependent on staff to learn stuff and hope they tell you the good bits. You have compensated for your time. You dive into it. Ireland used it to update their constitution to allow for abortion in a very divided Catholic and all kinds of reasons why this shouldn't have worked. But the process, same people, different process, yields more beautiful, coherent results. That form of democratic practice is starting to explode across the US. Bowling Green is using versions of it. Bend, Oregon is using versions of it. Detroit, cities in Maine, Jackson, Mississippi. And it's cutting across these historic divides and allowing people to see each other. AI is being deployed by organizations like Cortico, who we also had on Life with Machines, but also Google, and an app called Polis. This is where the Arju Tang piece comes in, to help people see each other, to make sense of where each other, to find the consensus and not just the division. So it's actually taking Tristan's critique of an algorithmic overlord dividing and slicing us and marketing us and selling us off to the highest bidder and pitting us against each other. It's flipping that on its head. It has a different incentive, setting a different goal for coherence, for understanding, for peace, creating incentive around that. And all of a sudden the system behaves differently. So we can do that. We're already doing that in these little pilot programs. Then I could see that scaling. And I certainly am trying to be a relatively loud voice in saying, all right, here's the AI age. I'm team life. I'm team human in the context of broader life. How do we make this work for all of us? Look at this example. Let's try this. Look at that example. Let's try this. I'm on a bit of a little rant here, and I'll trust your editors. But one last example of how this should go, not just critique of what we don't want, but highlight of what is good. Very recently, I was a part of an effort here in Palm Springs. We hosted an AI and creativity expo. I travel a lot. I'm on stage for a living, and I read 1,000 things and listen to all the podcasts. This was a community engagement effort around AI that I haven't really seen before. I've seen professionals do it. I've seen how slices, like here's the lawyers meeting about AI. Here's Hollywood creators meeting about AI. Here's the policymakers. Here's the doomsayers. Here's the investors. This was like just the people of a town. The school district was represented. The Chamber of Commerce is represented. Small businesses, parents, and creative people, and hundreds of them fill in the convention center hall to be like, what do we want? And because of the experience with social media, where we didn't seize that opportunity, we weren't offered it ever, and most of us didn't know to seize it. So every parent's dealing with it on their own. Every school, every office, every workplace, every romantic relationship, what's going on with you on your phone? I didn't choose this, but now I'm living 6 hours a day in Instagram. So how do we not do that again? And I'm not claiming Palm Springs has figured everything out, but it's a really beautiful example. Richmond has done some similar things with AI Ready RVA is a group I learned about. And they're just taking a collective engagement approach. Let's get everybody, let's kick these tires. Let's not be afraid to be afraid, but let's also not be afraid to engage and figure out how do we make this work for us? And what do we want not And the acceptable and unacceptable answer is to be a part of the fiefdom of a techno-fascist state, to be an outpost of Amazonia or Metaland. That's not good enough. That's not what the U.S. was founded on, despite its imperfections. We had got good bones. We reject tyranny here. Like, that's the whole point. And I think there's a real excitement. I'm excited for sure about, okay, so we could actually do more democracy with these tools. We could bind ourselves to each other in ways that the current system doesn't make easy, in fact, makes hard or to near impossible. And we could enlist these machines in service of our sense of peace, belonging, purpose, coherence. And here's how it's working in Taiwan. So I really am I want that. And I want, certainly my voice and my story is not just going to be an stop that. Stop bad thing. It's like, let's do more good thing, and figuring out, well, what does good thing look like? That flourishing that you're interested in. So am I.
Right. So how do you think common people contribute towards that kind of potential outcome with AI?
Yeah. Probably slowly, then increasingly, then dramatically and beautifully. You could be asking a question about economic policy. You could be asking a question about criminal justice policy. You could be asking a question about civil rights around Black people or around LGBTQ people. How does the average person join an effort to create a system that works better for the average person? And so I think we have a lot of historical analogs to support that pathway. It is not terribly unique for AI. It's a different domain, but it's the same concept. How do we exercise our power? How do we shape our worlds to ones of our own liking and to our own broad benefit? We certainly can sit back and do nothing and let existing winners accrue more spoils. That's probably not going to work out well in the long run. So I think there's, practically speaking, a way to look at every circle that we're already a part of and consider how active our choice making can be with our individual time, with our human relationships as parents and partners, and with our pets. Where is AI showing up? How are we making choices about what to use or not to use? How we already made choices. We've made choices about the meat we put into our bodies. What about the AI systems we allow into our families and workplaces? Is it about the energy usage? Is it about the ethics and morality of the senior leadership? Is it about the cost? Is it about the complexity? And so there's like an informed choice thing that we can do. I think a powerful thing we can do is use these systems in community. I think there's a lot of foisting things on individuals that doesn't serve us as members of society. And so it's as simple as, in whatever organization you're a part of, whatever team, talk about it. I speak to a lot of companies and I have these conversations with the employees, and they have these two identities. As an employee, I'm all in on AI. It's going to make us more productive and more efficient. As a person, I've got doubts. I don't understand what's happening here. I'm starting to feel this addictive tendency. My kid is using it to do all their homework, and I don't have any forum to raise this. So create a forum in your homeowners association, at your kid's school, in your office. Create a little working group, a little forum to talk about it. And then wherever you have a link or relationship to formal existing political power, put it on the agenda. Make it clear that this is something you care about for your community. There's going to be an economic development program in your town. How are they thinking about technology and AI and this future? Same with the school, same with your church group. Like, whoever's making plans, you don't have to join that committee and be a full-time member, but you've got to get into some kind of relationship with that. There's lots of theories of change and ways to do the social change things. You could read Marshall Gans. You could do a whole dissection of it. But these are some of the things that are occurring to me that I think are approachable and not too intimidating. None of these answers involves getting a degree in machine learning, becoming a top AI researcher, and becoming one of the 10 people defining these models at one of these 5 companies. We don't need to do that. We can't all do that. But we can all decide, okay, but what's the oversight of those systems?
Yeah.
You know, and who has that power? And if not, then let's create
Right.
that power.
So let me ask this follow-up question to that. So I hear you saying one of the first steps is let's begin asking questions in our local context about how are our local communities and people who have leadership in those communities thinking about AI and technology. And what then would be kind of a second level set of questions that you would think would be near the top of the list that people want to begin to get proficient in asking? So I'm thinking, for example, there's obviously lots of conversation about the way in which large language models have some sort of bias because it's trained on data, and the data represents human experience, and our human experience in our various communities is inevitably tainted by bias, often very destructive bias. And so that gets read into the system. So for me, that's one of the questions I'd always want to be asking is how does this system biased towards certain given presumptions? Another one, the one that I think I would want to be asking is, what kind of standard of truth is at play? Because when push comes to shove and you have dilemmas about how you're going to give account for something, you have to make some sort of judgments about what you're going to count as true. So what would be those kind of second level questions you think we should get proficient in asking?
Those are great questions. Bias, truthiness, or standard of truth. I would say explainability, transparency around use.
Yeah.
Disclosure. We are not against it, but we deserve to understand and know when AI and automated systems are being used. This was one of the key principles of the AI Bill of Rights that emerged in the Biden-Harris administration. We had Dr. Alondra Nelson on our show to talk about how that came to be. It's still a great idea, and communities can do it even if the federal government's not going to do it. So transparency, a level of explainability, to understand as much as possible how these things are working, and if not, at least how they're being used. I also think it's kind of an essential question. What do we want as a community? What do we want in whatever the department is? What do we want for kids' educational outcomes? If it's the sustainability, what do we want for our energy use and efficiency? If it's job creation, what do we want? What kind of jobs do we want? What kind of median incomes do we want? What kind of health? We need to get better at asking those questions. And I think we're out of practice with that. We shout a lot of things out in social media and to avoid. Our representatives are not necessarily listening to us as much as donors in many cases. And so to get better at asking, what do we want for our communities as a first order question, then the AI questions come in. How can we use AI to help us get what we want? And then a more fun one, I think, would be, what do we have to do that we don't want to do? And we all have that in our various roles. As a business owner and operator, I have to do bookkeeping and invoicing and taxes. I don't like doing any of that. Bring on the AI. Please displace that work from me. I'm inviting you to take that job off my hands. I come willingly. And I think that there is a level of excitable consent, jubilant consent, where in an employment context, in a worker context, you don't start with the CEO and the board looking at where we can save money. You start with the unions. You start with the worker special interest groups and employee interest groups. You start with committees and divisions and departments, and you ask people, what's the hardest part of your job that you've been struggling with? I'm here to help. I've got some AI with me. What's the most meaningless part of your job that's taken up outsized time and resources.
Right.
If we could approach people with that, all of a sudden the threat is now an invitation to possibility, to more participation, to more power. And we can deliver on that real promise of letting people do the meaningful work. But you cannot promise to elevate people into meaningful work, and you're not even bothering to ask those people what meaningful work to them is. That's just a charade. That's a scam. And we can't tolerate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like your work, How to Citizen, is immediately being brought to bear upon questions about AI, right?
Absolutely.
You're asking questions, what kind of communities do we want to have? How can we do this together? How is power going to be at play and all that? How do we work collectively towards the benefit of the many, not just the few? Get better at asking those kinds of questions, and then let that better set of questions inform the way we ask follow-up questions about AI. Yeah.
Yes, that's very right.
Really lovely.
It's how to citizen with AI, and those 4 pillars are a great starting point. They're not exhaustive. I think they're necessary, maybe not sufficient, but I think they're like essential layers. There's 2 other quick frameworks. So you have those questions. I think you also have, when I first started writing about AI long ago, a year and a half, 2 ago, I had these 3 A's. AI could be used to accelerate, to augment, to accommodate. Each of those represents a choice. What do we want to accelerate? As a family member, as a household member, as a community member, as an employee, as a citizen, as a resident, acceleration isn't good for everything. I don't want to accelerate mealtime.
Yeah.
I like taking my time with my meals. I don't want to accelerate time with my wife. Mostly. Sometimes I want to get through this argument real fast. Come on, AI, bail me out. But let's choose. Let us not just receive higher speed from a Mark Zuckerberg type, or him specifically. I know why he wants everything to go faster. It's great for him. It's not great for me. It's not great for us. So let's choose. Augment. Can we choose the augment versus the replace? And where? I already gave a few examples of that. Accommodate. This is huge. Where can we use AI to accommodate participation by people who have been excluded from previous versions of our systems? That goes to language skills, to learning styles and neurodiversity. That goes to all the DEI things, all the inclusion things. That goes to geography and time zone. Like, there are so many beautiful ways that AI can help us include people and their valuable contributions and perspectives that just technically was harder before. It will not solve these things. Just add AI is like saying just add power. We still have to choose how we wield it. But those 3 A's are a good rubric. The How to Citizen 4 pillars are a good rubric. And then the last thing is this concept of a power inventory, because I know a lot of people feel real powerless. And you're just like, well, the billionaires have a lot of power, and these corrupt politicians have a lot of power. And what is little old me going to do? We're more powerful than we think. That's a good book worth reading by Eric Liu from the Pacific Northwest and Citizen University. Every decision we make is an exercise in power. Every choice to consume or not consume, to tune in or not tune in, to tune in amongst which thing, to put this in my mouth or not, to pay attention to Baratunde right now, or scroll on my phone as I listen and I've just tuned this dude out. I'm giving my power in these moments. And we set a culture in that. How we practice power in these tiny ways is kind of how we do it in the big way too. And all these leaders we don't like, or these institutions that we feel are failing, they grow out of a soil set by the culture of our small interactions at home, at school, at work, at church. And so it matters. It won't change like the next election outcome necessarily, but it sets the stage, because I think we're in something that's dying. I think a lot of empire vibes from Western civilization history embodied deeply in the American project are being radically challenged. And some of them are pulling apart at the seams. Some of these wheels are falling off the carriage. And there's going to be a lot of pain in that. There already is. We're doing things we shouldn't be doing. People are suffering who have no need to suffer. And it is not the end of our story. And there's always something else being born, even as there's something dying. That's the circle of life. That's the thing we're a part of as humans. And if we lean into that and embrace that, it doesn't mean the pain isn't painful. I'm not saying everything's all right. It is not. But we also make choices now that set what comes. So let's make choices together that set some good to come of this, make all this pain mean something more than just suffering, mean that we're setting the stage for something to come that's even better than the thing we've been struggling through for the past couple centuries.
Been talking to Emmy-nominated host, writer, and public speaker Baratunde Thurston about his newest project, Life with Machines. Baratunde, this has been a great conversation. I'm really grateful for you and for the lovely conversation today. Thanks so much.
Lee Camp, I'm so grateful that you wanted to speak with me. And the way that you inquire is exciting. I think it's needed for these times. So it's an honor to be here with you, to spend this time this way. And I wish you well. Let's stay in touch.
Thanks very much. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible. Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carriet Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studio.